It's time to eat.
What are you hungry for?
Sit down and get ready to consume an abundance of fantasy football knowledge from Ross Tucker and Joe Dolan.
Feed me now. I'm starving.
On the Fantasy Feast Eating Podcast.
Yeah, let's eat, baby. It is the Fantasy Feast Eating Podcast. We are, of course, presented by DraftKings, which is perfect because we love us some DraftKings best ball. Make sure you use the code Ross when you're over there. And by the way, we've got some winners to announce. I'm going to announce the first, you know what? I'll go the first 5 contestants that will be in our best, maybe just the first 3 that'll be in our best ball contest. You can still get in, by the way. All you have to do is rate and review any of our shows. So the Ross Tucker Football Podcast or Even Money Podcast, College Draft Podcast, obviously Fantasy Feast. Not just rate, though. You got to give us a review or go ahead and take advantage of any of the sponsors you hear on any of the shows, such as this show, or any of the sponsors you see over at rosstucker.com. I am Ross Tucker, by the way. I should probably say that. I think most of you know that. Hopefully you enjoyed listening to Teron Armstead on today's Ross Tucker Football Podcast. You can watch that and this show, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. We're doing a best ball draft, probably a couple of them. We're going against you guys. We want to go against you guys. We want to dominate you guys. Joe's the top fantasy analyst in the galaxy over the last 10 years. And even me, I'm like a best ball extraordinaire. We are going to annihilate you. You won't even get in the top 2 because the top 2 will be me and Joe. If you'd like to try anyway and waste your time, go ahead and rate and review any of the shows or whatever. Send it to me, ross@rosstucker.com. Several spots still available for our first best ball draft. The number 1 selection goes to Matt Mullen. I don't remember off the top of my head what these guys did to get in. They either rated and reviewed the show or sent proof that they took advantage of one of the sponsors. But number 1 was Matt Mullen. Number 2, Thad Sulick, Sulek. And number 3, James D, Diee. I'm assuming that's your name. So I will be in touch with you guys, but congratulations. You are the first 3 entrants into our initial Fantasy Feast best ball draft over at DraftKings. I'm Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman. Probably should have said that like 2 minutes ago, but that's okay. You can check me out on social media at Ross Tucker NFL, at Ross Tucker Pod. Always joined by my guy Joe Dolan from fantasypoints.com. Check him out on social media at FG_Dolan. And of course, you can use the code 24Feast to get a discount over at fantasypoints.com. We love them. In fact, we love them so much that we're bringing over our spring assassin, okay, Tom Brolley. Nobody, and I mean nobody, follows the information that happened in OTAs and minicamp better than Tom Brolley from fantasypoints.com, which is why we have him on the show. Check him out at Tom Brolley, Brolley. And I guess before we even get Tom, welcome. I'll say that first. Yes. Tom, how are you?
Thanks for having me, Ross and Joe.
Always good to see you, Tom. Thanks for coming on the show. Joe, before we dive into all the information that Tom has mined for us, I guess I'd like you to kind of explain why this matters. Because it's so funny. We talk about stuff like this on the Even Money Betting Podcast. And there's a lot of people that like to play fantasy football or like to bet. But I feel like, maybe this might even be more frustrating for you guys, I feel like are not willing to do the work that it takes to have success. Or maybe they just don't care enough. Or maybe they can do it by just subscribing to fantasypoints.com since you guys are doing the work for them, which is kind of what we're doing today. We got Tom on today who did the work for us with these spring reports.
So here's
what you have to be careful with. You don't want to overreact, but you don't want to underreact either. Now, you don't ADPs are going to move throughout the summer, and it's going to start now. What you want to do is understand and realize that coaches are installing some things right now, and maybe if something that happens in OTAs, and this is why Tom's work is going to be so important at fantasypoints.com, okay? Something that happens at OTAs or mini camps or whatever carries over into training camp and maybe the preseason, you really got to start to understand that something might be going on here. I also think it's important for teams that have new coaches or a new coordinator or something. Hey, how are they working these players in? Which of these guys are separating? And of course, beat writer observations, maybe more so than anything, of, hey, this particular player, he's running with the third team, and he's carrying right now a 12th round best ball ADP. All right, maybe pump the brakes a little bit. But you also don't want to overreact, because rookies are typically always going to be a little bit behind the veterans. Coaches like to see them earn things. So there is a delicate balance to be struck. You don't want to take the information that you learn in April and May and June and have that color your analysis in August if something different's happening. But if something that you learn in April, May, or June continues in August, well, that's probably a good sign that it's real. So pump the brakes a little bit, but also stay informed. Keep rolling down the road.
Yeah, go ahead, Ross.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I was going to say, a lot of times I'm looking, we have injuries at the end of last year, trying to get updates on, where guys are at in their recovery process. That's, big thing this time of year. Of course, we'll get more information training camp time. Depth chart stuff, where guys are running. Are these rookies that just got picked? Are they, with the third team, are they making them earn their way up? Or are we seeing guys, playing with the first team, getting reps early in these workouts, working with the first team players? Those are kind of the things I'm looking for. The player, the way they're practicing, that kind of stuff. I try not to get too bogged down on that. It's a good sign that players are playing well, but that's something to keep in the back of your head for once training camp starts, once the real pads go on, and the balls really start flying. Then I don't try to get too bogged down in that stuff. Of course, these really fast guys and no pads, they're gonna look great running down the field down a straight line and catching deep passes, and so I try not to get too bogged down in that stuff. But yeah, we're really looking for injury updates, depth chart kind of stuff, and those are really the kind of things I'm trying to hone in here, May and June this time of year.
And I would just add to that, just an example, since I went to an OTA, now these guys are linebackers, so I don't think, it's not fantasy relevant. But for example, if you weren't paying attention to the Eagles, you wouldn't know that Zach Baun is running with the first team linebackers instead of Nakobe Dean. And so if they were running backs or tight ends or receivers, I can see people maybe drafting a Nakobe Dean type of player, right? Well, that might not be a real good idea. You better be paying attention to where some of these guys are stacked up, because to Tom's point, you might be drafting them way higher than you should be based on where they currently stand with their team. Now, Nakobe's coming off of an injury, so you don't know, but coming off an injury and being with the second team behind a guy that the new DC brought in to play linebacker, that is notable. I guess the other thing, Joe, that's notable before we dive into Tom's stuff is just that Tee Higgins signed his franchise tender. I'm not exactly sure, to be honest with you, why he did that. We talked about that on Monday's Ross Tucker football podcast with Jason Fitzgerald from overthecap.com. I don't really know why he did it, but he did it, Joe. And so what does that mean for Tee Higgins from a fantasy perspective?
Well, it means he's not getting traded. And maybe it's a sign of good faith. Hey, I'm going to be here. I'm not going to quote unquote hold out, even though even though there's really nothing in it for me to not hold out. Maybe he's committed to winning a Super Bowl, and he's trying to show them, hey, I'm worth negotiating a long-term deal with. What that means, though, is he's being underdrafted for fantasy right now. He's going some sites like wide receiver 27, 28. He's a 4th or 5th round pick. That's too late for Tee Higgins right now because that contract issue, I guess, was baked into that. That's all wrapped up. He's going to be a Bengal in 2024.
Yeah, and he'll now report for training camp. That was the big thing I was going to be looking for later this summer if he hadn't signed that franchise tag. We saw his teammate from a couple of years ago, Jesse Bates. He didn't sign his franchise tag, held out basically towards the end of August, finally signed it, skipped all the practices. So that's not going to happen now. So maybe there's a sliver of hope that they get something done here. Once you sign that franchise tag, you have till July 15th to work out a long-term deal. So maybe that was part of the equation for Higgins camp, that maybe they feel like a deal is not completely out of reach and they want to give themselves more time to get that done. So it's good for Joe Burrow. We touched on it in the article. He hasn't had a normal training camp since he's come into the league. Had COVID in 2020. An ACL recovery the next year in 2021, an appendectomy in 2022, and then last year's calf injury. It looked like he was going to finally have a regular training camp, and then he gets the calf injury first or second day of training camp. So maybe he's going to be dealing with this wrist injury, but he's working through it. I would expect him to take most of the reps, but now we're probably going to have Tee Higgins and Jamar Chase, who Jamar Chase has also kind of missed some time during OTAs, but he reported for the mandatory minicamp. He's going to be able to work with both of those guys. Of course, they have Jermaine Burton as well and Mike Gesicki, so this could be a good thing for Joe Burrow overall, because he has not had very many normal training camps to start his career, and we're heading into the 5th season here, so finally some continuity for Joe Burrow heading into training camp.
Tom, I didn't even realize it till you just said that. He's had a lot of injuries already in his career. Really good point. Almost as good as my point, which is that Labatt Blue Light is the best tasting light beer ever. Drink some Labatt Blue Lights with your friends and live life to the power of we. Always enjoy responsibly. Beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. Okay, so Tom, I'm kind of giving you a little bit of a blank canvas here because I want to know, and I don't know how you have it organized. I know you had that great article over at fantasypoints.com that people can check out. Give me your number one or your top couple things from the spring that you think, man, I got to make sure I mention that on the Fantasy Feast. That I think is really notable from the AFC.
Yeah, one thing stood out to me, Anthony Richardson this spring. We got a little taste of him last year. Didn't get to play a whole lot in our fantasy points data. He averaged 0.76 fantasy points per dropback. A guy like the QB1 last year, Josh Allen, he averaged 0.64 fantasy points per dropback. So Richardson, it was a very small sample size, played extremely well, and he's being drafted in 5th, 6th rounds of best ball drafts. But the big question is, can he stay healthy, and is he going to continue to run like he did? And one note that he was talking to media that he is not going to change his ways. He said, I'm a big quarterback, so they always think he wants to run the ball. He wants to be physical. So that's what's going to get me hurt. And, he said that this is the way he plays. His style isn't changing. So for fantasy, we're always looking for these dual threat running back, runners and passers, and just being able to add a little bit extra with your legs is huge for fantasy. So him coming out and saying that, he's not really changing his ways. And but the other thing with him, he was dealing with the shoulder injury. He was dealing with a little soreness this spring. So that was a little bit alarming. I think that, a couple bells went off, but have a couple more weeks, till training camp. So plenty of time to continue to rehab that arm and continue to build up the strength. So I thought that was one that really stood out coming from the Indianapolis Colts OTA workout.
It's interesting, Joe. First of all, I saw the shoulder soreness thing, and that set off some red flags for me. That did not sound very good. That throwing the ball was generating some soreness for him. That's a little bit like, really? And then I know probably in the short term, what he said about his style of play is good for fantasy. First of all, I don't know that I definitely believe him when he says that. I think, I would like to think that the head coach and the GM and the owner have made it pretty clear to him how important he is to the franchise, and that, yes, they want him to run, but they want him to protect himself when he can. I don't really know what to believe there, because if he kept playing the way he did last year, Joe, I wouldn't think he'd make it through the year. I mean, he got hurt a couple times last year. He took some shots you just cannot take on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think what was it, Tom? He played in 5 games, and I don't think he finished 4 of them. Like I think he only played like 1 entire game last year. And look, here's the thing with Richardson, as Tom mentioned, by the way, he would over the full year. If he was averaging the same fantasy points per dropback, he would have blown away Josh Allen. Now that we have a very small sample we're looking at, but people are taking that upside that Anthony Richardson had, and they are drafting him aggressively. I mean, we're talking about like QB5, QB6, and I've bought in on some level. There's some. I'm quite fond of Jonathan Taylor in the second round of best ball drafts right now, given his ADP and his upside. And I've had teams already where I've stacked Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, and Anthony Richardson. And that is leaning all the way in to a very small sample. But if everything hits, we're talking about a guy who's going to be an easy top 5 quarterback for fantasy. But there's a lot of unknown here. And that's part of the fun of fantasy. But look, we have to continue to monitor his progress because, as you said, Ross, his play style got him hurt last year. He also had some bad luck. And this is a player who was not a finished product by any stretch of the imagination coming out of the University of Florida.
No, he needed to play last year, unfortunately, and did not really get a chance to play all that much. I don't know what you have, Tom, on the AFC East or the Buffalo Bills in particular, but I did want to make sure I brought this up because I saw this. I don't usually pay that much attention to what people say in the spring, but did you guys see the quote from Brandon Beane talking about Keon Coleman? Did you see that video? I would not say it was encouraging. So there's 2 options there. Either Keon Coleman, he felt like he was struggling in the spring, and that was like the nicest way that Brandon Beane could put it, because he talked about it's a lot different than college. He's learning, he's working at it, all these things. It was not, or maybe Brandon Beane's just trying to slow the hype train down a little bit and temper expectations. You never know which one it is, but I don't know, Tom, if you saw those, or Joe, you watched the video, but that was noticeable to me.
Yeah, I think he's just trying to temper the expectations. He was kind of a darling coming out of the draft. Fans were getting very excited for him. He was kind of a little bit of a social media star in the weeks following that. So at the end of the day, this is a guy that was drafted in the second round. They lost Stephon Diggs. They lost Gabe Davis. So there's a huge, a lot of targets open. And I think, people are expecting him to be the guy that kind of steps into all that. But this is a process. This is a guy that was, a bit unpolished coming out of Florida State. And we'll see if he's able to step into a lot of that, leftover targets and stuff. But I think the GM is just trying to slow everything down. I think that was what that really was, that he was just trying to temper expectations a little bit here for the rookie who probably at some point will be Josh Allen's number 1 receiver. But maybe it's going to be a process here. Maybe the back half of the season is whenever he starts to really get going. So that's what I thought that was from Brandon Beane there.
Got it. What else really jumped out to you on the AFC side in the springtime. Obviously, we'll get to the NFC next week, but give me a couple more on the AFC side that really we need to make note of as we're doing these best balls, including against some of our very own listeners.
Yeah, the Chiefs have been a very interesting team this spring. Of course, we have the Rashee Rice situation going on. How long is he going to be suspended? But they've been practicing throwing deep here in the offseason. They brought in Marquise Brown. They signed him to a 1-year deal. Of course, they traded up with those Bills to select Xavier Worthy at the end of the first round. Both players with elite speed for the league. And this offense has become it's weird to say, but it's been a little one-dimensional here. Patrick Mahomes has morphed into Tom Brady the last couple of years, dinking and dunking, and he finished, in our fantasy points data, league worst 6.7 yard ADOT last year among 31 quarterbacks who attempted 250 passes. So you wouldn't think that with Patrick Mahomes. So big point of emphasis this spring was really throwing it deep, not just checking it down. Andy Reid has been pushing Mahomes to really get the ball downfield here. So, that's something to watch. And, to that point, if we're going to start throwing the ball more downfield, Travis Kelce, kind of said, he's going to continue to play here. I believe he said to the wheels fall off was his turn of phrase there. But he also acknowledged that he's probably not going to be on the field as much as he has in the past. If we look at the early draft trends, he's down to the 4th round here in best ball drafts, and he was pretty routinely a first-round pick basically over the last 4 or 5 years. So his ADP has fallen, and he's acknowledged that, if we look at his routes from our fantasy points data, 590 in 2021, down to 561 in 2022, 465 last year. And his route shares have also fallen down to a 73% route share last year. So, it's basic math. You got to be on the field. You got to be available to catch passes. And if that route share continues to dip here, if we maybe slip into the 60s, he just isn't the elite tight end, fantasy tight end that we have seen in the past. And hey, from the Chiefs' perspective, they're all about three-peating this year. They want that 3rd Super Bowl ring. They want to make history. No other team has done it. I don't blame them from their perspective. They have plenty of other talented receivers on this roster. So, hey, let's preserve this guy for when it matters most in the playoffs. And, it worked pretty well for them last year. So I would continue to expect Travis Kelce's routes and route share to continue to dip here. So Chiefs were a pretty interesting team here in the spring.
Joe, where are you at on Travis Kelce? Yeah. Watching last year, for the most part, I don't really remember very many games where it felt like he was healthy. Like, I felt like every game, like he would kind of look at his ankle and he'd come off for a couple plays. He didn't look happy. And all of a sudden the postseason happened, and it felt like he could do whatever he wanted to do in those playoff games, at least he and Mahomes. So going into this year, piggybacking off of what Tom just said, are you thinking we're going to get playoff Kelce? Or are you thinking we're going to get last year's Kelce, or something in between as long as he stays healthy?
I just talked to Seth Kaiser, who has the Chief in the North newsletter, and he does the tape study. He is very much on the side that Tom was just kind of looking at. At this point, Travis Kelce, we know both he and his brother are going to be first ballot Hall of Famers, okay? His personal legacy is solidified. It's now about the Chiefs' legacy. And that is about Travis Kelce being healthy for December and January, not September and October. And this might make me look completely foolish come the first 6 weeks of the season. I'm not in the Travis Kelce business this year. I'm not drafting him. Maybe here and there on best ball teams, even because his cost is down. But I truly believe Travis Kelce, I don't want to say part-time player, but I think it's going to be a smart-time player. I don't think they're going to make that. They don't. The days of him catching 100 passes are over. I think the Chiefs want him healthy for the winter and the playoff run. So I'm not anticipating big numbers for Kelce during the regular season, at least the early part.
That is really interesting because it's smart, really. It's like NBA. It's like what they do with some of these NBA guys to make sure they're healthy
Load
for
management.
the postseason. That makes a lot of sense. Excellent stuff from both of you guys. If we missed anything important on the AFC, Tom, you can bring it up next week when we discuss the NFC here on the Fantasy Feast. Other than that, I'm stuffed. We're done.
Thanks for tuning in to Fantasy Feast. Make sure to also check out the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Even Money, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.